Hello, and welcome to the Wednesday night Bible study with me, with Joshua Hester. Um, Rodney is out of town this week. He ever since the beginning of this coronavirus and all of this, he's been working very hard. So he is on a very well deserved trip right now this week, being able to take a break. Um, Very well deserved. He's been working very hard. He's been going through the end times, what happens after we die, or the end times is in the 1,000 year reign, um, Armageddon, all of those things. But I thought we'd take a break from that tonight. So tonight, I want to start off with a question, and I don't think it's a very hard question. Uh, what is your name? What's your name? When it's interesting with names, we don't get to pick our names. They're chosen for us. And some names have certain meanings in different languages. Names are interesting. But when you think of your name, what does your name mean? Not necessarily meaning like it means rock, like Peter does, or things like that. If someone else were to hear your name, what would they think of? Like I think of Joshua Hester, my name, in that in Prentiss County, where I'm from in Mississippi, my parents have done a really good job. They've tried really hard. When you hear the word Hester, they want that name to be respected, and they want other people to feel warm and to feel loved by that name. You know, when someone says Joshua Hester or my father and mother, James and Belinda Hester, they want to think, oh, those are some good, godly people. So when people think of your name, what do they think? What is your name? Who are you? What do you stand for? I've done some counseling in the past with some people who didn't like their name. They didn't like the family that they were always associated with because they weren't the best people. So what is your name? What does it mean? What does it stand for? Now, with that thought, we're going to go to the book of Genesis, okay? To the book of Genesis. We're going to be talking about a man named Jacob. But before we get to, our goal is to get to Genesis chapter 32. But before we do that, we need to look at the context of where Jacob came from. And you go to Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 of creation, and then people are made. God makes Adam and Eve. And then Genesis chapter 3, you have the fall where they leave the garden and they sin. Genesis chapter 4, you have Cain and Abel, where you see the first sin from one human towards another human. Genesis chapter 6, we see Noah and the flood and all where the world was destroyed. You get to Genesis chapter 12 and you have the call of Abram. And God makes a covenant with him in Genesis chapter 15 that if you will follow me, then I will bless the world through you. And your descendants will be like the stars in the sky. After that, we get to Genesis chapter 1, the birth of Isaac, the promised son. And then after Isaac, we get to Genesis chapter 25. And we're going to go there and read a little bit. Genesis chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25, verses 21 through 28. Genesis chapter 25, verses 21 through 28. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah his wife conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is thus, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. When her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak, so they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand, holding Esau's heel, so his name is called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in the tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So, this is where Jacob comes onto the scene. He has a twin brother. Twin brother comes out first. He's red and hairy, and Jacob has a hold of his heel coming out of the womb. And then in verse 27, we read that Esau was a skillful hunter. He was a man's man. He went outside. He played in the dirt. He loved to hunt, and he was good at it. While Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in the tents. He stayed around the house more. He didn't go outside as much, probably spending more time with his mother. Starting in verse 29. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of the red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore his name is called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So we have Esau, the skillful hunter, coming in, and he's been out. We don't know how long he's been out. He's been out a day, for several days. He comes in and he's exhausted. And Jacob is cooking, and he says, "Hey, Jacob, give me some of that stew." And Jacob wrongfully says, "Sell me your birthright for the stew." And Esau, being in the position that he was in, thinking carelessly about his birthright, he said, "I'm about to die. But what good is an inheritance or a birthright to me if I die?" So Esau gives his birthright for a bowl of stew. And then the last part of verse 34, thus Esau despised his birthright. Imagine, my sister and I got in some arguments when we were living in the house together. And for several days there would be tension. I cannot imagine the amount of tension, the fact that Esau despised his birthright. He despised what happened. I cannot imagine the tension within that home, within that family. So, that happens. Go with me to Genesis 27. There's 2 chapters over. Genesis 27. So, starting in verses 1 through 4. When Isaac was old, and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." He said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me, so that I may eat." And listen to this part. "That my soul may bless you before I die." So this is called the blessing. You had the birthright, which was usually given more so to the firstborn, and then you had the blessing. The birthright was more of things, property, servants, livestock, and then you had the blessing, which is more of a spiritual thing, like you are now the head of the household. All the other brothers or sisters or servants answer to you because you're the one in charge now. And for Isaac, it was even a deeper meaning, because Isaac had been promised that through his seed, whoever this son is that comes from him, that he blesses, through that son, the world would be blessed. So it was a big deal. A very, very big deal. Go with me to verse 5. Now Rebekah, who is Isaac's wife, was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I heard your father speaking to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food, that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare for them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And he shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies. But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him, and bring a curse upon myself, and not a blessing. Verse 13. His mother said to him, Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice, and go, bring them to me. So, Rebekah, hearing Isaac say to Esau, I'm about to bless you, she says, Hey Jacob, this is your chance. Go, give me some food to fix for your father. Go and get me these things so you can get the blessing. We can trick your father. He's old and he doesn't see well. We can trick him. And Jacob says, I'm worried. What if I get a curse instead of a blessing? And Rebekah lays it all on the line for Jacob. And she says, Let your curse be on me. Only obey my voice and go bring them. And go bring them to me. So, verses 14 through 17, Jacob goes and gets the goats and they fix the meal, and Jacob puts on Esau's clothing, and they take the skin from the goats and they put it on his arms and his neck. That way if Isaac touches him and feels him, he'll feel something hairy to think it's Esau. Picking up chapter 27 and verse 18. Jacob. So he went to his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I. Who are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said to his son, How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? He answered, Because the Lord your God granted me success. Then Isaac said to Jacob, Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether or not you are really my son Esau or not. So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, who felt him, and said, The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother's Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, Are you really my son Esau? He answered, I am. Then he said, Bring it near to me, that I may eat of my son's game and bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate. And he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, Come near, and kiss me, my son. So he came near and kissed him. And Isaac smelled the smell of his garments, and blessed him, and said, See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven, and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. So, Jacob deceives his father. It works. And Isaac unknowingly blesses Jacob. He says, let you have lots of grain and lots of wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers. And he gives them the blessing. Picking back up at verse 30. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting, He also prepared delicious food, and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, Let my father arise, and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me. His father Isaac said to him, Who are you? He answered, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me, and I ate it all before you came? And I have blessed him. Yes, and he shall be blessed. As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, Bless me, even also, O my father. But he said, Your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing. Esau said, Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He has took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. Then he said, Have you not? I just imagine Esau looking at his father and begging him and saying this, Have you not reserved a blessing for me? Isaac answered and said to Esau, Behold, I have made him lord over you, and all his brothers I have given to him for servants. And with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, Have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said, Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of the heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. So Esau comes in, and he's ready for the blessing. And Isaac says, I have nothing to give you. I have given it all to your brother. Your brother has stolen it. He has deceived me, and he has stolen it from you. Verse 41. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob her younger son, and said to him, Behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away. So Esau says, This is a sad time. But you know what makes me feel better? The thought of killing Jacob. And Rebekah hears this, and she says, Jacob, you have to leave, because he's going to kill you. And he does. And then in Genesis chapter 29, Jacob marries Leah and Rachel. And then at the end of chapter 29 and 30, Jacob has kids. And that gets us to Genesis chapter 32, where we've been wanting to get. It's been years. We don't know exactly how many years, but it's been long enough for Jacob to work 7 years for Leah, 7 years for Rachel, and then to have kids. So it has been years since he has seen his brother Esau. So Genesis chapter 32, starting at verse 1. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, This is God's camp. So he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau. Ooh, Esau's here. His brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructed them, Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, Thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants. I have sent to tell my Lord, in order that I may find favor in your sight. So, Jacob, after years of running, Jacob is in the vicinity of Esau. And he sends a messenger and he says, hey, I want favor with you. Verse 6. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you. And there are 400 men with him. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. I would be too. He divided the people who were with him and the flocks and herds and camels into 2 camps, thinking, if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. So, last time you see your brother, you've taken his birthright and his blessing. And the only thing that makes your brother feel better about the situation is that he's wanting to kill you. And then you come across him. And you send messengers, and the messengers come back, and all they say is, he's coming to meet you. But not just him, he's bringing 400 men with him. It says here that Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and I'm sure that he was. Going to verse 9. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all these deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So Jacob prays to God, please, God, help me, deliver me from Esau. You said you promised me that you would make my offspring great. And I'm asking you to do that. Verses 13 down through 21, Jacob sends gifts of livestock and rows and rows of livestock and gifts to Esau, hoping to soften him up, hoping to appease him. And then it comes, verse 21. So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. So here we are, the night before their meeting. We're going to skip verses 22 all the way to the end of the chapter. I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert of what happens. Chapter 33, Genesis chapter 33. So, Jacob's gone through the night into the next day, and here we are. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 female servants. And he put the servants with their children in front, and then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Listen to this, verse 4. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. Everything was okay. His brother didn't want to kill him anymore. His brother ran to him and hugged him and kissed him, and they both cried. They both wept with one another. So everything turned out okay. Now, go with me back to chapter 32, starting in verse 22. This is the night. This is the night before Jacob thinks he's going to die. Or there's a good possibility that he's going to die. Starting in verse 22. The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. He sent everyone away from him. He was by himself. He didn't want anyone with him. Verse 24. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. So, here we are the night before Jacob is about to meet his brother, who he thinks wants to kill him. And there appears a man. And it says, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. So they wrestled all night long. I don't know how many hours they wrestled, but they wrestled all night long. When the man saw, verse 25, when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. I don't know how strong this man was, physically strong, but I do know that he touched Jacob's hip joint, and it popped out of socket. So it didn't seem like to me he needed a whole lot of strength if he could just touch him and make his joints pop out. Verse 26, then he said, let me go, for the day is broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. That's interesting. They're wrestling, and Jacob has a hold of him with his hip out of socket. And the man says, let me go, because the day is breaking. I wonder what the day breaking has anything to do with it. But Jacob says, no, I want you to bless me. You ever wrestled with someone? I've wrestled with people in my time. When I played football in high school, we would wrestle all the time and just get all over, pin one another down and almost get into fights, actually. You get to know somebody, okay? You get to know who they are. Even at night, they were wrestling. If you wrestle with someone with hours, you get to know who they are. Verse 27, and he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Why would this man, after hours of wrestling with him, ask Jacob what his name was? I think I would have said something else, like, hey, I'm about to push you off of me. Hey, I'm gonna get you your other hip socket. But he says, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Verse 28, then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. The idea of someone seeing God face to face, that doesn't happen. Because if you see God face to face, you die. Just like Uzzah touching the Ark of the Covenant. Boom. He was dead. So that's why, verse 25, verse 26, he said, let me go, for the day is broken. You can't see me in the daylight. You can't see me face to face. Or at least in the daylight. So we figured out that the man is God. Why did God ask Jacob what his name was? Of course, he knew Jacob. He knew all of his thoughts. He knew him in the womb. And he knew every thought action or thought that he would have after this. So why did he say, what is your name? Of all questions for God to ask someone, what is your name? I think the answer to that question is back in Genesis 27. And I think of Jacob when he was wrestling with God and he wanted God to bless him. And I think in 27 and how Jacob was trying to get the blessing of Isaac. Chapter 27, verse 18. So he went into his father and said, my father. And he said, here am I. Who are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me now. Sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. The last time The last time Jacob had been asked, "What is your name? Who are you?" he answered Esau. He didn't answer Jacob. And with that decision of stealing the birthright, Jacob had to run from Esau for years. Until now. We're at the night before Jacob meets Esau. And Jacob literally wrestles with God. And God looks at him square in the face and he says, "Who are you? What is your name? What are you about, Jacob? What do you stand for?" Because in the past you've been deceitful and you've stole and you've lied and you've been running from that for years. And you're not going to run anymore. You're going to meet Esau in the morning. So who are you? What is your name? And Jacob answers, "Jacob." And then God answers him back and says, "Nope, you're no longer Jacob." Jacob ran from his sins. Jacob ran from his brother. Jacob was deceitful. From now on, your name will be Israel. And Jacob didn't know it at the time, but from him, from Israel, would come Jesus, who would change the world and save the world. And I think of Jacob, and I think of our lives as Christians. And I ask you tonight, what is your name? What are you about? Who are you? And in reality, most of the people watching this video, I know your name because you have the same name as I do. Acts chapter 11, verse 26 tells us what our names are, and that we are Christians. We are disciples of Christ. We are followers of Jesus Christ, and we all share in that name. Just as Jacob was changed from Jacob to Israel, when I became a Christian, I was no longer just Joshua Hester. I was Joshua Hester, and I am a Christian. And that's the name that I hold to, and that's who I am, and that's what I'm about. I'm about Jesus. I'm a Jesus follower. And I think of what Jacob got from getting that new name. I think of how through him the world would be blessed. And through him he would have offspring like the grain of sand, or like the stars in the sky. And I think of the things that we get today. We get today as Christians. The first thing I think of is that we're promised certainty. Jacob was very uncertain about the next day, but God gave him certainty. Micah Urban and I this week were talking, and he said he's had this thought recently on things that are temporary and things that are permanent. And he's come to realize that the things that I thought were very permanent, they're not. They're temporary. In reality, the only things in life that are permanent are our relationship with God, where we stand with Him, and how we influence other people in their standing with God. Sometimes I get caught up and I think my job is permanent, or my location is permanent, or even my family is permanent. But they're not. They're very temporary. And with the name Christian, we can be sure of those things that are permanent. Another thing that I think about that we get when we become Christians, when we have the name Christians. If you're in a church building, I would ask you to look around and see all of the people that we have, that we can share that name with. And it doesn't matter if you're with Christians right now, within the presence of Christians right now or not. You have support of Christians that you see every day, and we all have supportive Christians that we will never meet that are all around the world. With the name Christian, we get a family. And the last thing that I think about when I think of the word Christian, and I think of our names and who we are, I think of Jesus Christ. I think of how we share our name with Him. And I think of how Jesus had power. Jesus had more power than this world had ever known and will ever know. And I think of how He had power over death, and He had the power to change lives. And I think of us today and how the blood that ran through Jesus' veins, that's what's in us today. And that the blood that was shed for us is what cleanses us. And I think of how Jesus had power over death. Jesus is alive. And how He had power over physical death, we have power over spiritual death. And how we defy death. And we look at death in the face and we say, we're not scared of you. Because I, Joshua Hester, as a Christian, I will never die. I will live eternally, forever. And I think of how Jesus changed the world and how He turned this world upside down. And how, because I share in His name and I share that purpose, that through Him, through sharing who Jesus is, I, as a Christian, have the power to change the world. Or I have the power to at least change one person's world. So my question for you tonight is, number one, what is your name? If your name doesn't have Christian in it, then you don't have all these blessings. Then, for me, I would be just Joshua Hester. And my name's meaning would be based off of my family or it would be all circumstantial. But if you are sharing the name Christian, then that is permanent. If you are a Christian, if you do have that name, I know that sometimes Christians like myself, we forget who we are. We forget whose we are. I think of high schoolers and how they struggle with finding out who they are, what their talents are, what they're about. And me being the age that I am and not being too far removed from high school, I struggle with that as well sometimes. But something that I don't struggle in is who I am in Christ. So have you forgotten that? Have you forgotten who you are? Have you forgotten your name? If you do, I pray that you contact me or Rodney or one of the elders or someone, and that you talk to someone about it. What is your name? Who are you? I'm thankful that you tuned in today, and I hope to see you as soon as I can.